Hello. Welcome to the Link Spring Cycle using driving question boards with Phenomena. I'm Judy Phelan, and I'm delighted to be working alongside you as you do this cycle. We are assuming that you are a teacher of high school biology, chemistry, physics, physical science, earth science, or some combination thereof, and that you have already completed the first cycle in this playlist, exploring the basics of phenomena. As we begin to think about driving question boards, one of our first questions might be, what are they? Well, a driving question board is a place where you can post the phenomenon question for students to look at during the entire unit of study, which may take several weeks. Students will return to the question board repeatedly over and over again and use it to drive their learning. It might be something you place on a bulletin board. It could be on a flip chart where you have one page for every class you're teaching. Maybe you'll use a trifold science display board that you can put away and take out as classes come and go. However you decide to design your driving question board is totally up to you. The more important question might be, why should we use one? Well, remember I said that you're going to be using the phenomenon questions. And there is a phenomenon question for every unit and every module. So as you set up your board, you'll want to think about posting the unit phenomenon question as your top heading and the module phenomenon questions as subheadings. Then your students will have the opportunity, as you see on these little post-it notes here, to formulate their own student-related questions to the phenomenon. One of the first reasons that you might think about why use a driving question board is to drive that student learning as they return to the phenomenon questions, to not necessarily read about science and how it works and not listen to someone explain science and how it works, but to actually figure out the science that it takes to answer their questions and how that works. A second reason for using a driving question board is that it can help develop a storyline that flows and links concepts together. Now, storylines are not something that McGraw-Hill has invented. They come as an outgrowth of the Next Generation Science Standards, and I invite you to go to the website nextgenstorylines.org to read more about them. But here's a small excerpt that I will share. On any given day, a classroom visitor should be able to walk into a group and say, "What are you working on today? And why are you working on it?" Now, in previous times, students might have said something like, "Well, because it's the next chapter in the book," or "because my teacher has assigned it to me." But when using driving question boards, hopefully their answer is because we're trying to answer the questions that are on that driving question board. That's what we're working on, and that's why we're doing it. NGSS further defines a storyline as a coherent sequence of lessons in which each step is driven by the student questions that come from their interactions with the phenomena. So I want you to be sure to look in your teacher edition from Inspire Science, where you'll find a great deal of support for developing unit storylines as well as module storylines. I think you'll be pleased to know also that even down to the lesson level, you will see focus questions and a reminder that students need to read the focus question and add it to the driving question board. So as we think about those coherent chunks of information, your driving question board is where the storyline unfolds, the linking of the coherent chunks of information that flow together to answer the phenomenon questions. The focus questions that can help us answer the lesson storyline and questions, which help us with the module questions, which lead to the overall answer to the unit phenomenon. So storylines are very easy to create on a driving question board. A third reason you will want to consider using a driving question board is it can allow more of your students to engage because they ask their own questions. And when they've asked their own question, they have ownership in finding out the answers. Each student edition will begin with this particular pattern of things on that first page. They'll all start with a phenomenon question, and then there'll be a phenomenon photograph, just in case the devices are not readily available. Then you'll see a phenomenon video, and these are excellent, engaging videos for your students. But after the video, they'll see a science and engineering practice called asking questions. But this SEP does three important things. First, it says, do you? And that means every student in my classroom. Do you have a question about the phenomena? And if so, add it to the driving question board. So this is a place where you can also use your science and engineering practices as students work with their driving question board. We always want to keep in mind the LinkSpring PAC framework, which can guide us into that student-centered classroom. And I invite you to consider that driving question boards are inherently personalized because the students are asking their own questions. You'll find easy ways for authenticity and students to be involved. And then as your students share, they'll see connectivity. So keep this PAC framework in mind as you begin to tinker with your driving question board. You may have special student groups that you can target and gain some skill in engaging them in the DQBs. In your Inspire Science program, you're going to find something called Universal Access that will give you specific strategies for working with girls or diverse learners or foster care kids. So I invite you to look at that resource as you begin to plan your tinker. Now, you currently are watching a Spark video, which begins every LinkSpring cycle. Following this, you're going to be able to answer some reflection questions, some pre-cycle reflection questions, which kind of ascertain where are you now in your practice with using driving question boards. Then you'll have an opportunity to actually tinker and do some driving question boards with your students. And then finally, you'll have the opportunity to answer some post-reflection grow questions where you'll be able to think about and reflect back on how you've grown your craft and become better at using driving question boards. I remind you that every unit and module in Inspire Science has Encounter the Phenomena. So look at your curriculum, figure out where you are in that curriculum, pick your unit and your module, and let's get started. I wish you good luck as you learn more about driving question boards.